going on, DeRae? Cautious Coffee.
Social impact.
Season 2. Do you have a nonprofit?
I would never.
Why?
There are so many of them already that exist.
How many are there in Houston?
Thousands, tens of thousands.
I think the number is like 15,000 nonprofits.
Stupid. Everybody wants to start a nonprofit. You want to know why?
Tax benefits?
No.
What is it?
Attention-seeking behavior.
Yeah. Why do people start nonprofits?
Ego. Why do people start nonprofits? I think people start nonprofits because they're lazy.
Explain.
They didn't, partly lazy and partly ego-driven. Lazy because there's probably already a nonprofit that's doing what they want to be doing or very close. And they haven't taken the time to search for it, to make contact with the people that run that nonprofit. And that is what triggers me.
So that's very interesting. I know this is probably not where you're going with this whole conversation on nonprofits, but there's a new newspaper here in Houston, or journalism outlet. It's called Houston Landing, and it's
I know someone chief of staff of that.
Yeah, and it's a nonprofit, right?
Yeah.
It's a nonprofit publication, which I think helps in an extent that they don't have to worry about revenue coming in.
Mm-hmm.
It gives the journalists more freedom to go out and chase stories. I think it helps a lot with investigative journalism that goes on. But one of the concerns with this nonprofit is their thought is, okay, we want to do something good and make sure that journalism is a huge focus. But when Houston Landing made their, debut, and you go and look at their team, 7 of the 9 reporters came from the Houston Chronicle. And so when you talk about wanting to grow journalism and you poach 7 reporters from, the only newspaper really in Houston, the only one that's printed, is that a good thing? Are you actually solving a problem, or are you just moving the pieces around?
You're just moving the pieces. You're massaging the balls of your ego.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of nonprofits that do great work, that are out there.
But
and
how do nonprofits get funded?
By the generous donations of people. Sometimes it's you've got the foundations that do it. Bill and Melinda Gates.
Yeah, I sit on the board of a foundation here in Houston.
So what is that like?
I think, and here's part of the reason why, we're kind of having this discussion is because I've sat on the board of a couple of nonprofits, and we're always competing for dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And if there was more integration, more collaboration among the 16,000 nonprofits, just in Houston alone, and who knows how many of those are like national organizations,
smaller chapters.
Yeah.
How many are defunct, barely operating?
Yeah, right, and who have good people. And even the whole nonprofit space is just so wild how it's set up, and they're basically out here fighting with one hand behind their back, just because of the rules. And I forgot to put in the notes kind of the beginning of nonprofit and like piety and the Puritans and how they felt bad about capitalism and giving 10%, all that mumbo jumbo stuff. So it's kind of an afterthought, nonprofits in the first place. But my issue is that everyone who wants to start a nonprofit just hasn't done the legwork to make sure that like whatever nonprofit they want to start, it hasn't already been done.
Mm-hmm.
That's what bothers me. Okay. That's at the heart of this. That's what bothers me, Austin. That's why I want to fight.
Okay. So if you do start a nonprofit, you need to do your research, right?
Do your research.
You've got to have a unique value proposition.
A unique value proposition. I know people who have businesses, startups. I'll ask them, what's your value proposition? And they'll look at me with a blank stare.
What gap are you filling in the market?
Yeah.
What do you do differently that someone else is equipped that they can't do?
Knowing that you're starting from scratch, knowing that you have to compete for dollars.
See, this is kind of interesting because I was the president of IBC Houston, which is a nonprofit for business communicators.
Yeah.
There's gosh, 10 years ago, there were probably 14 to 15,000 members. I think right now they're between 5 and 6,000 members. When I was the president of the Houston chapter, and this is pre-COVID, I think we had 170, 180 members. Right now they're at like 95 members, the Houston chapter. I'm no longer a part of this organization because I saw so many issues at the national level. And then I felt like I was doing too much here at the local level and not having enough support. So I was just drained out, and I resigned my board position. I mean, I fulfilled my term as president, but I was just tired of dealing with it. But we realized that there was a lot of issues going on, at least with the international level, and just mismanaging funds. I looked through their taxes, and it was not good. And just
throw them under the bus, Austin.
Being out of touch, and this is all stuff I've said publicly too as well. But just being kind of out of touch with what was going on in the world, and understanding like the digital transformation that was going on. And I think COVID kind of exacerbated that. And why would people join a nonprofit membership for $300 when they can get a lot of the content for free on YouTube or through podcast? And at this time, I was having a conversation with actually one of my other podcast co-hosts, Thomas Bain. And we thought, okay, IBC Houston and IBC in general are dead. Like, why don't we start our own communications organization out there here in Houston? And then we thought more and more about it. We were like, okay, well, the time, the money, the effort, the recruitment, it's probably just not worth it, especially when there are other organizations that are out there. So my thought was, okay, well, what can I do to make IBC Houston better? And I think I did that while I was part of the chapter and was the president. I mean, we won International Chapter of the Year. I mean, it was a lot of great work from a lot of great people that, made that happen. But I think it was the deliberate choice to take what we had and make the best of the situation. And I think in situations like you're saying with a nonprofit, there are so many people out there that start one because of the egos, like you say,
and they might
wanting
care.
to be a founder.
They might care.
I'm not doubting that they care.
They might care.
But
they want to do something.
You can have an impact by being on a board of directors. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
You go find the board that does the thing that you want to do,
and be diligent about the charities. That they are utilizing the funds that are gifted to them in the right way. Yeah. They are making a positive impact on the community. I'm not sure if you know Russell Wilson, the quarterback for the Denver Broncos,
Never heard of him.
His wife Ciara. He has a foundation. And within, the first part of 2023, it was reported that I think only 20 cents out of every dollar is distributed to like some sort of charitable.
Love to see it.
That's insane. Like, where's the other 80% going to?
Yeah. Overhead.
It's a lot of overhead.
Operating costs.
But that's a problem with a lot of nonprofit. I won't say a lot, but
that's why I'm saying they need to collapse on one another. They need to integrate. They need to collaborate. They need to be able to stretch those dollars, right? So every dollar, it should get, be more than a dollar.
They're all fighting for the same resources.
All fighting for the same resources.
Exactly.
Okay? That's why it's like, look, if we team up, we can, take a more competitive, we can collaborate, but also be competitive, right? If we have two people in the same position, well, we're going to choose whoever's best, right? So take a kind of a capitalistic approach where, the cream rises to the top, so to speak, and we're optimized. We're optimizing. We're able to scale.
So I'm going to take hunger organizations, for example, because I know that, that is something that's really a huge issue. And I think something that we'll talk about at some point.
Okay, yeah, the food deserts.
Yeah. So I know in Houston, right, like the food bank is a huge
major player.
It's a major player. In Houston alone, 1 in 6 adults, 1 in 4 children struggle with hunger. Houston Food Bank, they provide meals to 18 Texas counties. They get millions of dollars of donations, but there are other organizations here. There's Target Hunger, Rise Against Hunger Houston. There's so many different food banks that are going on. Right. Instead of just having all of these different food banks, does it make sense for Houston Food Bank to take over these smaller ones, or does some of these nonprofits that exist, maybe they're smaller, but they know their community more intimately and what that community needs and how to actually help them. Does that make more sense than maybe having a national organization that is kind of out of touch with that really local market? I don't know. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. But I think it should be, there's no doubt that the boots on the ground, people that are closer to it should have, a say where it's, bottom up. But the resources, that's what I'm kind of coming back to, right? You can still operate, but, brand name recognition matters, access matters. So if you have, a national account manager who, manages all your big donors, well, doesn't it make more sense, right? You have someone who already has those relationships, so to speak. So I'm not saying they can't exist or that they shouldn't. And I would say depending on performance would truly determine whether or not they, get taken over by a larger nonprofit.
So you think maybe they should have to meet certain performance metrics over a certain period of time?
I think they should kill their ego. And if they're not hitting those metrics, like figure out, how to meet those metrics. Like if they're not achieving their mission, they need to be thinking about different ways to do stuff.
Here's a thought. And maybe this is something that happens, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what if there was like a probation period for nonprofits, right? That if you wanted to start a nonprofit, there was a 5-year probation period that you had to do, you meet certain type of criteria. Because ultimately the benefit of having a nonprofit is the tax side of things, right? But if you were to set a certain criteria that was in place, and if you met that certain criteria, then you were granted nonprofit status. And I know there's already an application process where you have to meet basic criteria, but instead of just putting it on paper, you actually had to prove that, okay, we are raising this much money. We are impacting this many people. This percentage of our money that is, fundraised is actually distributed to the public, whereas this percentage is only going through overhead cost. Like, would that solve part of this problem? If you had a stricter criteria and you had that probationary period before you were granted nonprofit status?
So I'm going to have to say no.
Okay.
Because nonprofits are already like held to an unfair advantage, so to speak. When, if you think about a for-profit organization, and that's kind of my take, that, like what happens in the for-profit world, right? If a business is struggling, it either goes away or someone acquires it, right? For, pennies on the dollar. And they just collapse in on one another. So you really have their survival of the fittest. You don't have that. You don't have that pruning mechanism in the nonprofit space, from what I know. Is that a thing? Is that because, in the for-profit space, the weakest link goes away. But you just have these kind of stragglers that are, kind of weighing everybody else down.
Yeah,
in the way they're causing noise.
I think some of these like nonprofits that exist, like people just don't understand fully what the organization is part of. Like, right? So I go back to the IBC Houston experience. Like our board, I don't know. I think our budget we had like $30,000 to $40,000 in the bank. We were a nonprofit. We just hosted luncheons and did professional development events. Like, why do we have $40,000 in the bank? Like, what is that? What is that going for? Yeah. Like, I think, sure, we gave around $2,500 in scholarships each year, but we had sponsors. I mean, I think for me, I fundraised $25,000 in sponsorships one year. If you're a nonprofit, like, shouldn't you be basically operating around at the end of the year where the money you bring in is the money that you put out?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
What's the point of having $40,000 in the bank?
I think it's fine to have reserves.
Like a rainy day fund. Yeah, I get that. I get that.
But I don't know.
It shouldn't be growing exponentially.
What amount that needs to be, if depending on the size of the organization. I just think that there should be a better, like it should be managed better, and more competitive. Like if you're going to compete for the dollars, be willing to collapse up under organizations that are similar, have a similar mission, maybe have more competent leadership, more access to bigger names, bigger donors.
Yeah, I mean, and you can always create a local chapter, right? You can roll it in to be, the Red Cross Houston chapter or, a regional chapter. I think because ultimately at the end of the day, you want to have the biggest impact you want to have the biggest and most positive impact on society that you can, right?
Right.
And if someone else is more equipped to help you do that and accomplish that goal, why not partner with them?
Right.
It to me, it doesn't make sense. The big issue with nonprofits that I have is the church.
Okay, say more.
And their nonprofit status.
I love the church.
You really, DeRae? Tell me more.
Because the churches, they're supposed to take care of the homeless and the downtrodden.
Agree. And I think a lot of them do.
There
is a
instead of the government.
There is a food shelter that it's Lord of the Streets. It's here in Houston. Mm-hmm. I think it's near Midtown area. One of my friends has been volunteering there since COVID. He's been cooking and he's really, made a positive impact and just kind of making the meals better. Something as simple as making fried rice for the people that come in and
add some salt.
Yeah. I mean, and just because he had a passion for helping these people. And I think it's made a positive impact. So yes, I do agree the churches are doing a lot of great work. But at the same time, you look at Lakewood Church here in Houston.
Okay.
Joel Osteen, who many of you listening to this podcast probably know. I remember during Hurricane Harvey.
Okay.
And Mattress Mac, you probably have also heard of, whether for his gambling addiction or his comments on politics. He was the first one to open his doors at his furniture store during Hurricane Harvey as shelter. If you're not familiar with Lakewood Church, it is their venue. They host service at is where the Houston Rockets used to play. Back in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, before the Toyota Center opened. So it's a massive basketball arena that was renovated into a church, if you will. And the Osteens, they make millions of dollars a year. Most of it is because of their books, speaking fees, things of that nature. But they have a nonprofit status, right? And during Hurricane Harvey, they closed their doors. They didn't open their doors to the people. And their claim was, it's just too much of a risk right now with the flooding. Mm-hmm. I lived right across the street from Lakewood Church. And I saw so many people on Facebook defending Lakewood Church and the actions of Joel Osteen for not opening their doors during Hurricane Harvey, saying it's really, really bad in Houston. I was like, oh my gosh, you're just listening to the message and not even doing a little research. There was no water near us. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's an issue that I have. And then I also have issues with the churches that start politicizing things, right? Yeah. And bring in politicians to speak and campaign really at the church. And these churches, they're not losing their tax exempt status. Mm-hmm. And so I do have some issues with the church having the nonprofit status, because I think there are churches that are doing great work. There are synagogues, temples, all of that
most
are doing
churches.
But there are a lot of bad apples.
The majority of churches are doing God's work.
There are a lot of bad apples, though.
Yeah. A lot of struggling churches out here.
But we'll talk about church and religion on another episode. But
can't wait.
I don't know. I don't think I don't know that churches should have a nonprofit status.
Okay.
I just, because I mean some of the funding that they're doing. I mean, there's.
But I think faith is a huge part of this country and how it was founded, and
yeah, I'm not debating that.
I think getting access to people generally, comes through their faith.
Here in the United States,
probably the world over.
I think that's dying.
You think it's dying?
Faith in the United States, absolutely.
Yeah, I think there are some stats on that. People are less likely to go to church. I don't go to church.
I don't either.
Yeah,
I used to.
My father's a pastor, and I have never been big on the church.
Like less than 10 years ago, 2014, 2015, I led like community group.
Yeah.
On a weekly basis.
junior pastor.
No.
Austin.
No. But yeah, I mean, I think you could still have faith, right?
Yeah.
But not be a part of a church.
Absolutely. 100%.
But we'll get into that on another episode. But
the nonprofit status really bothers you.
Yeah, it does. Just because I see how so many, at least here in Texas, so many churches have kind of exploited their nonprofit status and have really violated, you're not allowed to campaign. You're not allowed to.
With like real estate too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're taking advantage of the loopholes that exist. And
but,
kudos to them for doing that.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I mean,
they're not the first.
It's why take advantage of that rather than helping people.
Yeah,
you see pastors flying on private jets.
Oh, that's insane.
Come on.
That's insane.
And I know we're only using some, anecdotal evidence. And like DeRae said, the majority are probably doing great work, especially at the local community. Like Lord of the Streets, which I mentioned earlier, doing great work here in Houston. And they're filling a void that, maybe the Houston Food Bank can't provide. But
what about the nonprofits that are sitting on all that money, like you were saying?
Yeah, it's a problem.
And they can't get it out the door.
Well, some of them don't know where to send it.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's insane. Mm-hmm. That's insane that they are, at the end of the year, whatever their fiscal year is, they're sitting on cash they couldn't get out the door for one reason or another. Yeah. Or they don't have enough notoriety. No one knows they exist, so no one's applying for the grants where those funds are restricted. Right? So, they can't, they're just sitting on them.
Yeah. It is kind of interesting. So this is the company that I work with now. We're partnering with Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo.
Okay.
We're hosting Community Day.
Is that a nonprofit?
Yeah. Right. They donate millions of dollars a year for education.
Yeah.
Actually,
what big of a percentage goes to actually help people?
I don't know the specifics, but it's something. I think each year the rodeo donates, I want to say like $25 to $40 million in scholarships. Mm-hmm. So it's a massive amount. So my company, we're sponsoring Community Day. Mm-hmm. Your company is sponsoring First Responders Day. For Community Day, if you attend from 8 to noon, for every person that attends, we're making a donation to a nonprofit. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of a question that we considered is, well, do we donate the money to the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo that is going, that we know it's going to certain education. Yeah. We might not know exactly how it looks.
Yeah.
Or do we donate that to our foundation, which we know exactly where the money is being distributed to, where we think it can have the most impact on the communities in which we live and work. And so that's a conversation that you've got to have. It's okay. And I'm proud at least that, we are having those conversations that, okay, what is the way that we can maximize this dollar the most? Mm-hmm. Is it through organization A or is it through organization B? And I think if you at least have that conversation and maybe you decide to go to organization A for one event, maybe it's organization B for another, right? Like disaster relief. That's always one, do you want to be the one distributing the funds or do you feel like there's another organization that's best equipped? We saw this with COVID-19, Barstool Sports. They had the Barstool Sports Fund where they were, instead of going through a charitable organization to distribute money to bars, restaurants, small businesses to help them during the pandemic to pay rent and things like that. Barstool, not a nonprofit, they had concerns that not all the money was going to go to the people who needed it the most. So they sought out these people. People applied. They did a little bit of research, maybe not the best research, who knows? And they just wrote a check to people. So they were able to have 100% of all the funds.
Yeah.
That's something when people are diligent and think about that. So I don't know. I don't know what my rant was about, but I think kind of ties into your point of be diligent about where those dollars come from. Don't just blindly write a check to an organization. Understand where that money is going.
If you have money to write a check, you probably don't care, and I'm guilty.
Yeah.
Right. Because when I get to the end of the year and I understand what my tax liability is going to be for the following year, I'm pulling out the checkbook. I'm trying to get my tax liability down as much as possible. So whether I'm investing in my business or donating to charity, I'm going to pick my favorite one. And maybe I know someone who sits on the board of one, or I have a friend who, they're trying to close out their year and they need, there's a gap. I'm there for it.
Yeah, I mean,
But yes, be diligent, be mindful. But usually people who are cutting checks don't have the kind of time to be like, oh yeah, well, let me see your grant breakdown. Let me see, let me see the after action of when you funded a program or, an event.
I mean, I do think transparency is crucial. I mean, I used to donate.
But no one's looking, though. That's what I'm saying.
I know, but like you, I used to write checks or use matching funds blindly for an organization. And I kind of got tired of it one year because I felt like the only time they reached out was when it came to the golf tournament that I always played in. And, I was able to use matching funds at the company that we worked with at the time to help benefit them. And we were able to do like a dollar for dollar match. And I think it was up to $5,000, which for the organization and as small as they were, it was a huge boost for them. But then I kind of just started thinking more and more and more about like, where do these funds actually go? How are they used?
Well, you could probably find that out.
I did.
Okay.
I did, based on tax returns.
Right.
And the tax returns were concerning to me.
Yeah.
And I haven't donated to them since. And I think that is something that is so important for these 501c3s, these nonprofits. Is you got to be transparent with people, right? Because some people, like you said, don't care.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're just trying to limit their tax liability for the year. But other people do care. And I think if you're not transparent, it has real world consequences, because when people find out that, maybe 50 cents of the dollar only goes to the people who need it most, I don't know, you could lose donors, you could lose people. And maybe people are more cautious and don't want to help out. I don't know. Be honest.
It sounds good. You're very, you're an angel.
Debatable. The bald spot it's actually a bald spot, not a, not a halo.
It sounds good. But in the real world, when the rubber meets the road, we know there's all kind of color. There's gray. There's a bunch of nuance. There's ambiguity, and decisions are getting made.
Nothing is black and white. There's
Nothing's black and
area.
white. And I empathize because a lot of nonprofits could probably be more impactful if they didn't have like all these restricted funds that, it doesn't allow them flexibility.
Yeah, that's a very
It
good
doesn't
point.
allow them to hire the best talent, right? Top talent. Top talent's not going to go and work at your nonprofit.
That's one of my biggest beefs, right? Is people.
So when you're talking about tax returns, I'm like, well, what do you really see on the tax returns? You see what the executive director, like all the employees are making.
Well, yeah, for this specific organization, there's a board and there's an executive director.
Yeah.
The executive director was a former pastor at a church. Has a very nice home in Austin.
Yeah,
and is taking a very nice income. And then you see how much money is actually spent on the organization itself, and that just brings some question marks.
But that's part of the issue, though, right? Is
But then you talk about nonprofits, and employment. Like, I know so many talented people that work at nonprofits, and they're just like overworked, they're understaffed, and underpaid. You put some of these people out into the free market and they're making 2-3x of their income.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's hard to retain that top talent when you can't compete with the Joneses.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
And that's so difficult. So I do understand when there are nonprofits that are paying people what the market value is. And I do get frustrated when you see like a CEO of a nonprofit and, oh my gosh, this person makes $250,000 as a CEO. Well, they're also managing hundreds of millions of dollars. If they were in the public sector, they'd be making millions.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do think that is difficult, because once you do have good volunteers and good people in place that are benefiting the nonprofit, it's tough to retain them. So it's a complex situation.
It is.
It's very complex. And I think I've probably, I don't know,
It's very complex.
Probably gone back and forth on this podcast a little bit.
But the social impact, which is what it comes down to, right? Where the rubber meets the road. I want to root for the nonprofits, but I also want to encourage the nonprofits to take a deep, long, strong look in the mirror and say, hey, if there's somebody out there doing something very similar, let's reach out.
Yep.
Let's partner up. Let's go get together.
Collaboration.
Let's collaborate.
Yep.
Right. Let's make the pie bigger.
Absolutely.
That's my takeaway.
We're stronger together,
Yeah.
not divided.
Yeah.
I think that's true with most things in life. Play to your strengths. If there's someone out there that's doing it better than you, join forces.
Yeah.
If someone has more resources out there than you, leverage them. Because if you want to have an impact and a positive impact on society, it takes a team. It takes a unified front. So that's Cautious Coffee.
Till next time.
Take care, everyone.